Okay, everybody, welcome to Southeastern Fly Live on social media. This is the fastest 15 minutes in Facebook and social media, and I am David Perry. I've got a face made for radio, and I know it. So here we go. So before we get started with the fly fishing, I just want to go ahead and put a little bit of information out there that just a prediction that Urban Meyer will be leaving Ohio State. Greg Schiano is going to be the interim head coach, and then Kiffin goes to OSU next year. Just so you saw it, just remember you saw it here first, or if you've seen it already, that's fine too. That's just a little bit of prediction for the upcoming football season, which we love football season here in Tennessee because it gets people off the river and gets them out of our way, right? All right. So let's talk about, we're going to talk about three things today. Busta Brown, which is a fly that was created right here in this very office. We're going to give a quick fishing report from the Elk and the Caney Fork, and we're going to have the question of the week, which is pretty interesting, and I just want to throw that in there. So let's talk about the Busta Brown. Back whenever I first started fishing, I didn't tie flies, but I decided I wanted to, and a really kind gentleman by the name of Chuck Robinson, who owned the Fly Chucker over in Brentwood, Tennessee, was kind enough to help me out and help me get the materials for my first fly. Chuck was really big and instrumental in a lot of folks' fly tying and fly fishing pursuit here in the Middle Tennessee area. He's now since moved to Washington or Oregon, one of the two, but just a heck of a guy, and I think everyone would agree. But anyway, I went over to Chuck's fly shop back, it's been a long time ago, several years ago. And I said, hey, I want to tie one of those Eat It Chucks. I want to tie one of those flies, and I had some other stuff that I wanted to try to learn how to tie. I had a new vise, and I didn't know anything about tying flies. So Chuck was kind enough to help me with get the right materials for the fly, the Eat It Chucks, and as well as a few materials that I thought I wanted just to try out. So I came home that evening and came up here to the office and set up the vise, and I started trying to tie the Eat It Chucks, which was just basic. Basically, it was purple floss, red wire, and then some partridge. So I think that's what it was. Anyway, I was really the purple floss was super easy. I got it. The red wire was also super easy. I got it. Then I tried to just tie in the soft tackle, which is what this fly was all about. And I tied on it, and I tied on it, and I got it wrong about 50 times. And finally I got frustrated and went downstairs and got some red wine, poured me a glass, came back up here, and I tried and I tried and I tried again, and it's still, I couldn't get it done. Couldn't get the soft tackle portion of the fly tied. And I started to call Chuck, but it was about 10 o'clock at night. We were going to get up, or I was going to get up the next morning with a couple friends and go to the Elk and fish. So I set that aside, and I took some peacock herl, I took some wire, and I took some Flashabou, some green Flashabou, and I started trying to tie my own version. And whenever it came time to tie the soft tackle in, I had a squirrel tail laying there on the counter. And I chopped some of that off, and I just stuck it on top, tied it off, whip finished it, tied two more of those, and I set the Eat It Chucks aside and decided that I needed Chuck's help on it. So anyway, the next morning, we all got up, and me and two friends of mine went down to the Elk. It was getting late afternoon, not a lot was going on, and we had spread out. And anybody that, if you don't know about the Elk's a little tailwater here in Middle Tennessee, down by Lynchburg, where they make Jack Daniels, and they stock it pretty heavy at certain times of the year. And I swear this day they stocked it heavy, but nobody was catching anything. So as I was trying different flies, I remembered that Eat It Chuck, or that Busta Brown, and I didn't have a name for it at the time. And I tied it on there, and I started swinging it like I would a soft tackle, and started picking up fish. Well, my two buddies that were with me were downriver, and they apparently were watching. And as I was casting this thing out there and catching fish, the one the closest to me was close enough to really get a good eye on what was going on. And he came up, and Barry said, hey, what are you using? And I said, it's this fly that I tied last night. I tied a few of these up after I went over to Chuck's, and they're not Eat It Chucks because I couldn't figure out how to tie those. So he said, do you have any more? As all good fly fishermen would say, do you have another one? Unless you have too much pride, which he didn't. I said, yeah, I've got 2 more. Here you go. And I gave him one, and he went back downstream, and I watched him for a little while, and he started catching fish. As he was catching fish, I noticed below him was my friend Gary, and Gary says to himself, I'm sure, well, those 2 are catching fish. I wonder what they're doing that I'm not doing, and nobody else is doing either. So I saw him get up and wade up to where Barry was, and I saw them talking, and then I saw them both look upstream, and then Gary came up to where I was, and he said, hey, I need one of those flies. And I said, all right. So I gave him one. So we had 3. Each of us had one. I had 3 that I had tied, and we were all using one. We were all catching stalker browns. Wasn't a big deal. But we finished out the evening just catching fish after fish after fish. Now, some of that was just because they just stocked. Obviously, it wasn't like this is the super fly or anything. Hey, Jared. And hey, Greg. See you in there too, Kevin. All right. Getting some folks in here. So anyway, we finished up our evening, and our tradition at the time, and we still hold this tradition on our floats, was part of this tradition anyway. We still hold this tradition in the evening whenever we were done fishing to eat a Snickers, and we also would drink a beer a lot of time. Hey, Kevin. So we would drink a beer, a beer, not a lot of beer, but a beer while we ate our Snickers, and we would rehash the day. So we were talking about that fly, and Barry says, what's the name of that fly? Where'd you get it? And I said, I tied it, myself last night. Now I'm feeling kind of proud, and I still got a headache from the red wine. So he said, well, what's it called? And I said, I don't know. I just tied it last night. I'm not really sure. And he goes, well, it sure did bust those browns up, though, didn't it? And I said, yeah, it really did well on the browns, So anyway, I came home and immediately tied, a whole handful more. And I tried my hand at the Eat It Chucks again. And I got to the exact same point to where it was time to tie the hackle on, and it just didn't work out. So I stuck with that fly, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, wow, that fly, it's one of those flies that you quote, unquote, invent yourself whenever you first start tying flies. So I said, well, maybe I'll just name it the Busta Brown, because Barry said, hey, it busted those browns up pretty good. And so I did. So anyway, flash forward about, 6 or 8 years. Little River Outfitters, Byron over there, has the Little River Journal or whatever it was called, something like that. Little River, it was a monthly online magazine that Byron had put out, and I wrote a couple articles. So I wrote one that's called Observations from the Tailwaters. It was a 2-part article on how to fish, kind of fish the southern tailwaters, just some hints about things that I've observed. There's no scientific data or anything like that. It was just observations that I had made, put it into a couple of articles and sent it off to Byron. Then I wrote another one that kind of looked back on my time of fishing Lynn Camp Prong up in the Smokies outside of Townsend, and we should do that every Friday afternoon. Me and a friend of mine would go up there, and we would fish Lynn Camp Prong. So Byron texted me one day and said, hey, I need another article. And I was like, I don't really have anything, to give you. I said, he said, well, if you've got a fly or anything like that. And I said, oh, okay, I've got the Busta Brown. I can tie that. So I called up my friend Anthony Williams. And I said, hey, he's a great, fantastic photographer. Don't tell him I said that. But I called Anthony and I said, hey, can you take some pictures for me? I'm writing this article called on the Busta Brown, and he kind of knew what the fly was too. So we went over to Anthony's house that evening, and I tied one up, and as I did, it was step-by-step tutorial, just like all magazines have and most folks have done before. So I tied that up, and he took the pictures as it went. We wrote the article and shipped it off to Byron, and Byron published it, kindly published it for me, and so it's out there now. So actually, Kevin asked for it asked what we were catching fish on and the other day, and I had tied up some Busta Browns and thrown 1 or 2 of those out there, and they worked pretty good. And when Kevin texted and say, hey, kind of what's working, I said, hey, try this out. Well, I just sent him a text with that article in there, so I thought I would talk about that today and just tell you that especially right now, we're going to kind of transition over into a little bit of the fishing report. So get ready. So the Caney right now, the big chatter that you'll hear right now is it's low on dissolved oxygen, which it's always a little low on dissolved oxygen this year. Every year, this time of year, every year for as long as I can remember, when the summer came, it seemed like it got low on dissolved oxygen. So they turned the sluice on. So if it's low on dissolved oxygen, probably where the fish are going to be is, yep, you guessed it, where the oxygen is. Where is it mostly? So that's going to be in the riffles, and just as the river riffles tail off into the pool, right there on the back side, a lot of times you can catch a fish. So you can take this Busta Brown and you can just swing it right across the backside of those riffles, and you can pick up some fish, and you can drive your fish count up, and you can catch some pretty nice browns doing that. Not always the biggest fish in the river, but you can get some pretty nice fish doing that. So that's what's going on with the caney. So if you, and what I'll do, I'll go ahead and I'll post the link up on the website or on the on Facebook, and go ahead and give you a. You can go ahead and tie some up, and you can do any variation that you want. Like the ones that are on the website are green, and I think they're copper wire with squirrel's tail. Couple hints on it: the squirrel's tail, if you can find the tips of the tail that aren't white, they seem to work better than the ones that have the tip of the fibers on the tail of white. So you want as dark as you can get, basically. It seems to work better this time of year. And a red fox squirrel tail really is dynamite. That really does work out well. So that's one thing. You can do it in black. I did some in black with red wire, black Flashabou with red wire, and you always want a little bit of the fiber sticking out from the peacock herl or peacock eye in between the black sections, and you'll see what I'm talking about whenever you see the article. So there you go. That's the Busta Brown. So let's move on. So the caney's fishing okay. It's not super great. It's not super bad. The Busta Brown swinging, that's working as we've been floating it. A lot of people are floating dry flies, and they're getting some actions on those. And most of the people with the dry flies seem to be, not always, but they seem to be standing close to the riffles. So you might get some action there. The elk is dingy. It rained it rained last night all over Middle Tennessee. So the elks, and I didn't go down there today, but it's probably going to be a little muddy today. And it's been kind of dingy anyway, so it may take it a day or two to clear up. Again, you might try the Busta Brown down there and move that through some moving water, although it's hard to find a lot of moving water. It actually, if the water is moving and it's not sitting still in a pool, then you'll probably get some action there with the Busta Brown there as well, or any soft tackle will work. Not much going on with dries down there. There's a little bit of action on the dries, but not a lot. On the elk, it's been pretty good, but I feel like the fishing is kind of tapering off a little bit down there. And I don't know if it's because the water's getting dirtier and dirtier as the summer goes on, or maybe that full moon that we had, the lunar eclipse. That was a big moon, by the way. I don't know if any of y'all saw that. But the lunar eclipse, that moon really seemed to kind of slow the fishing down a little bit. So I'd be anxious to see if it picks back up here in the next week or so. We'll see. Hopefully it will. Been getting some reports of kind of still a little bit slow yesterday, and I haven't heard today, and I don't know, it may just be too muddy to worry about today. So that's the fishing report on the elk and the caney, and we're running out of time here. Can't be the fastest 15 minutes in fly fishing if it lasts for 20 minutes, can it? So the next thing that I want to talk about is our question of the week, and if you had been around the past couple of weeks, you heard the question of the week came about because a lot of people, you hear the same questions over and over on the boat as you float down the river. The first one was, how high does the water get? And the answer is, you see that wet water line, it's about that high. But if you're not on the river all the time, you really don't know. So that's a good question. So the today's question, though, is a little bit different. And just before we came on live, I thought, well, I need to do a poll because I haven't done a poll in a while. But so everybody likes to eat a little something before they get on the river. A lot of times, maybe the McDonald's or wherever you want to eat, maybe they're not open yet. But let's just say that they are, and you can get a sausage biscuit. Right, so now we're talking about food, one of my favorite subjects, as you can probably tell. The camera puts on about 10 pounds, though, for y'all that don't know that. I'm kidding. I put on 10 pounds in the past probably 2 months. Anyway, so grab a sausage biscuit at McDonald's, or if you're like Marty, you get up early and you do your own stuff before you go to the river. But so the question is, if you get a sausage biscuit and you eat a sausage biscuit, do you put mustard on it? Right, so that's a yes or no question. My nanny, she put mustard on hers, so I put mustard on mine. But do you put mustard on your sausage biscuit? I absolutely do, almost every chance I get. So that's going to be the question of the week, and there's no right or wrong answer, but it sure will be interesting to see who puts mustard on their sausage biscuit. So anyway, that's the fastest 15 minutes in fly fishing right there. We talked about the Busta Brown. I'm going to go ahead and put a link up there to it. So if you want to tie some, you're more than welcome to it. If you do tie some, let me know how it works, and especially if you're in a different area. If you're in East Tennessee, Arkansas, anywhere else in the United States, I do want to know that too. It's caught fish all the way to California, but I don't know. It's been a while since anybody's reported back to me. But anyway, there you go. That's the fastest 15 minutes in fly fishing. I'll get that out in a minute. Looking forward to talking to you next week, and look for a poll and a link. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Facebook.